All right, I think we'll get started. I know some people will be jumping in as we go through. So my name is Melissa Baker-Cox, and I'm the Pathways and Equity Consultant with Limestone. So we're excited to have all of you here today. On behalf of all of the secondary schools, it's great to have just one session where there's students from all different schools across Limestone today joining us to have one session together. And I think I'd like to introduce Kyle and thank Kyle for taking time to meet with us today about the Ontario Student Assistance Program, or OSAP program. And I will turn it over to you, Kyle. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. So like Melissa said, my name's Kyle Velpe. I'm a financial aid advisor with St. Lawrence College specifically. I usually work on the Kingston campus. Of course, we're working remotely during this time, but we are full service and able to help students 12 months throughout the year. Actually, summer is the busiest for us, of course, because everyone's able to start to apply for the upcoming semester in September if you're choosing to study then. So I'm more than happy to share information and resources with you today. And then if follow-ups needed, we'll also have the contact information here as well in the presentation. With that being said, I'll get started with the presentation. Usually takes me about 15-20 minutes to walk through. I can't necessarily see the chat function as of right now. So if you have a thought during the presentation, if you want to put that in the chat, I do have room for Q&A at the end, or if you want me to stop during the presentation, I'm okay with that as well. So whatever works best for the crowd. But yeah, please feel free to put it in the chat and I can address it during or after the presentation. So with that being said, I will get into the information. So I'm here to talk to you about the Ontario Student Assistance Program, better known as OSAP. This program provides financial assistance to students to help them attend college or university. OSAP is based on your financial need with one application. And so that's an application for every year you attend studies. So if you're taking, let's say, an example, a 2-year or 3-year diploma, that would mean 2 or 3 OSAP applications. And with that application for each academic year, you'll be considered for both non-repayable grants as well as OSAP loans. Grants is the best kind of money. It's the money you won't have to pay back, and loans is money you will have to repay. This loan funding, it remains interest and payment free while you remain in school full time. Am I eligible for OSAP? So to be eligible for OSAP, you must meet all 4 of these criteria. So you must be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or protected person, an Ontario resident, currently attending or entering an OSAP approved program and school, and currently enrolled in or entering a certificate, degree, or diploma program. How is OSAP aid determined? So this is the quote-unquote magical formula at its very basic form. First, what OSAP will take into account is the allowable educational costs. So what that means is tuition compulsory fees, books, supplies, equipment, computer costs, along with living and childcare expenses if applicable, along with travel. It then minuses the expected financial contribution, so the money brought to the table. And depending on your situation, it could be just the student, it could be student and parent, or student and spouse, for example, along with assets that might be used as a financial contribution towards your studies. This then equals the calculated financial need on the OSAP application. So here's a breakdown of what that looks like. For this example, it's deemed that the educational costs for this academic year, and this is probably an example for September to April, they're saying the education cost for that 1 year is $15,000. The expected money brought to the table by it's probably just the student's income in this example, but regardless, it's for $3,600 is what they're thinking that the student will have based on the way the application was filled out. So the financial need breakdown is $11,400, which is probably roughly what the funding assessment will look like on that OSAP application. How much money could I get from OSAP? So here on this screen in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a nice little chart. These are the numbers from last year, so the academic year of 2021. The 21-22 amounts are set to be announced. As of right now, you can apply for the upcoming academic year in 21-22. So if you're starting in September, but OSAP assessments to determine what your actual money you'll be getting throughout the academic year is usually later in the summer. We're hopeful for the end of June, just so people can make their decisions and go from there. But most of the time when the ministry launches, it's kind of middle July. And these numbers are going to probably roughly stay the same because the world or the formula hasn't necessarily changed too much from last year to this year for OSAP. But that very top row, public college or university in Ontario, so that's what St. Lawrence College would fall under, is in this row. For a single student with no dependents, so the student doesn't have any children, in that category, the maximum amount of funding they would get is $545 per week. And then if a student was married in a common law relationship or a sole support parent, the max they could see is $830 per week. I'll get into greater detail. The way OSAP works is you don't get money every week or every 2 weeks like in a job. OSAP's released twice in an academic year, once in September, and then the next time in January at the beginning of each semester. And then that's the breakdown of what that kind of works out to be per week based on that funding you would receive. Over and above that, you could qualify for additional grant funding as well based on your situation. An example from that additional grant funding could be, yes, you'll be getting that money per week, but potentially you identify as a student with permanent disability. If that's been approved on the account, there could be additional grant funding based on your funding entitlement with OSAP as well. Get an estimate. So you can use this today. You can do it right after this presentation if you choose to. You can go right to the OSAP website. So that's ontario.ca/OSAP. You'll see the option to log in if you already have an OSAP account, or register to actually make your account, or you can bypass both of those and maybe you don't have necessarily the time to go through the application and make your profile today. You can play with the estimator. As you can see on the screen, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And once you've played around with it, again, it's a basic view. It's not necessarily XYZ of what it would actually be on the application, because they ask more basic questions in the estimator, of course, but it could give you a good idea based on your program, when you want to start, at which school, and a rough estimate of your income, or parents and spouse as well, to have an idea of what an estimate from OSAP would look like. And here's a nice little screenshot of what that would look like if you used the aid estimator this year. It's a nice little breakdown on this estimate in the sense that you can see grants outweigh what loans are, but the total funding entitlement for this student example. So again, this is September to April. You would get an entitlement in September of this funding, and then in January as well, to make up a total of $12,100 in that mixture of grants and loans. They've deemed at the very bottom of the screen, of course, they always put it nice and small, but they've estimated that the total costs for this study period to be $17,000. OSAP's only going to be covering $12,100. So you can see there's going to be a gap that hopefully either savings come into account with this student prior to starting the study period, or if you can work part-time to cover at least that $5,000 gap, because OSAP will not be covering all the costs of let alone education, and then in this factoring in travel and living allowance, as this person would not be living at home or with their parents in that example. I will save you the headache of reading this whole screen out. This is something that was introduced last year on the OSAP website, but better known as like the OSAP account for an individual. It's called the OSAP information module. You complete it once and that's it. You'll never have to complete it again. The whole module takes about 15 minutes. The intent and the idea behind it is to help students or the recipient of OSAP funding to know how OSAP works, what your responsibilities are, and they're really trying to hit home the OSAP program for all post-secondary education. So regardless if you're going to college or university, but anyone that's receiving OSAP, as much support in using your financial resources, examples of like creating a budget, understanding what credits and debits are, and not necessarily leaving yourself short, meaning, okay, you get all your OSAP money in September, but maybe by the end of October, November, you're out of financial resources and you're not going to get OSAP again until January. These tools are put in place not only to make you aware, but resources available at the beginning, and then knowing to come to us in the financial aid office if you need other assistance, to have you be starting on the right foot. So you've never had OSAP before, I'll apologize in advance for your sanity. You can complete the OSAP information module after making your profile. You don't necessarily have to do the application right away. Again, this takes up to about 15 minutes to do the module. An OSAP application, if you can do it all in one sitting and have your information, takes another 20 to 30 minutes. So if you can shell out, in that example, 45 minutes to an hour, you could probably get through the entire process. But if you want to do the module in one sitting and then come back and apply for OSAP the next time you have the ability to, you're absolutely able to do that. So that's the OSAP information module in a nutshell there. How and when do I apply for OSAP? So the 21-22 application is available now. As I've kind of said throughout the presentation, you're more than welcome to go right to the website, ontario.ca/OSAP. You can play with the estimator in the example I've given earlier. But depending on your situation, if you've had OSAP before, you would just log into your account and update any profile information if you're required to. So profile information is just your personal info. So name, date of birth, SIN, mailing address, contact info, your email, phone, and that profile then carries forward. So after you've either updated or made your profile, registered your profile with OSAP, you would then be able to submit OSAP applications or just one application. Potentially, maybe you're deciding between two schools or two programs. You can have more than one OSAP application submitted to get an idea of what funding you'd be entitled to. Just when you make your decision, close the applications that you don't need for OSAP, so that way the one can process further. And our little cutout on the right there, this is the steps broken down. As I said, you'd register your account. You will need your SIN. Part of the information too as well, you'll either need your income or, depending on your situation, your parents' income information. So that's your tax information from 2020, along with a spouse if applicable as well. And once you've then submitted your application, you'll then have a bunch of supporting documentation to complete, which can vary from individual to individual. There's definitely signature pages, so the student or the OSAP recipient understanding their roles in the receiving of OSAP, parents as well, so they can acknowledge that, yes, I know my information was used, and they sign off and consent to it, along with your Master's Student Financial Assistance Agreement, which is a elongated way to say registering your bank information. So OSAP knows where to put the funding after it's released. When OSAP funding is released, they do look to pay tuition first, so they'll pay any balance of OSAP first, and then the remaining funding would be deposited into the bank account from there. That's very simplistic of supporting documentation required on OSAP. Depending on your situation, there could be a longer list, but after you've applied, and if you have any questions of, I don't know how to get that, or what exactly OSAP does need, that's when you would want to contact the financial aid office that you had applied to. Am I considered an independent or dependent student? So I'm going to define what this means specifically for OSAP. What I'm going over here is literally just for the OSAP program. A definition of a dependent student. So this means you need to claim your parents' income / information on the OSAP application. And the definition of a dependent student with OSAP is you yourself are not married or in a common law relationship. You're not separated, divorced, or widowed. You are not a sole support parent. You've been out of high school for less than 6 years before you start post-secondary school, and you haven't worked full-time for at least 24 months in a row. This is what an independent student is, definition for OSAP. You've been out of high school for 6 or more years. You've either worked full-time for at least 24 months in a row. If you're in a situation where both your parents are deceased, if you currently are in the care of the Crown or something along the lines of Children's Aid Society, you're not currently married in a common law relationship, and you don't have any dependent children. And then just to make it a little bit more complicated, so as I said earlier, OSAP's made up of loans and grants, and then you get your total funding made up of loans and grants. There is federal loans and grants, and there's provincial loans and grants. Federal and provincial have their own definitions of what a dependent is, or independent student. The 4-year rule for determining independent student status applies to the federal component of the funding assessment. So meaning on the federal side of things, you're considered a single independent if you've been out of high school for 4 years or more. But the provincial side says you're not a single independent until you're out of high school for 6 years or more. So with that being said, if you choose to, if you're a student that's kind of in that hybrid or in between, so if you're out of high school for more than 4 years but less than 6, if you don't want to provide your parental information and be assessed as an independent, you can do that, but you're only going to be assessed for federal funding and potentially leaving money on the table from the provincial side of things because you'd be considered a dependent and you need your parents' info included on the application to be assessed for that funding. Do you get all your OSAP funding at once? No. OSAP funding is dispersed in 2 installments, and this is regardless if you're in a 2-semester program, so that's your Class 6 September to April, or a 3-semester program. So let's say if you're attending a September to July. The first installment of OSAP, it's front-loaded. You get 60% of your funding in September, and the second installment of funding for the remaining 40% is released at the beginning of your second semester. So in September, You get 60% of your funding. It's front loaded because most costs are front loaded, not only with education, so you get more compulsory fees. You need all your books, your technology, any other supplies. If you're living off campus, for example, too, most of the time if you're getting a place to go to school, they want first and last month of rent. So that's part of the kind of formula along those side of things of why they do 60% in September, and then you get the remaining 40% at the beginning of your second semester, which is January. How should you budget your funding? Full disclaimer, when you sign up for OSAP, it's completely your decisions being made with that money. You signed off saying, yes, I'm responsible in ensuring that my tuition's been paid, which it automatically is when OSAP's released, but you'll have to ensure that it's been paid if for any reason you didn't get enough OSAP funding for those examples. But from our standpoint, from St. Lawrence College's financial aid office, this is what we recommend that you do. If you're in a 2-semester program, so you're studying from September to April, we say make a payment towards your winter tuition from the fall funding. And if you're in a 3-semester program, from that money you get in September, because you're getting 60%, and you're going to get a lot of money in that sense because you're getting funded all the way until July, for example, in a 3-semester program, make a payment towards your winter tuition, if you can, in full from that fall funding. The idea behind it is we want to get as close as a 50-50 split as we can. Yes, costs are front loaded in September, but if you can make like a monthly budget to say this is what my expenses are for each month, it just makes it a lot easier. And to say, okay, when my money's released in January, they only need to pay my summer tuition out of that amount. That way you're not leaving yourself really thin, because if it's released in January, you didn't pay any of your winter tuition. Your OSAP has to first pay your winter and your spring tuition out of that winter funding, and that can either leave you with a tiny amount of money in your bank account or none at all. Can you receive grants that you're approved for, not loans? Absolutely. So as I've said, when you apply for OSAP, you're always going to be assessed for grants and loan funding to make up your total amount. But if you see that nice big number of grants free money, it stays free as long as you're academically successful and don't withdraw, you can select the no loan option, only take the grant funding, and the loan amount remains unreleased. The thing I like to say and bring up in this category is, let's say you took the grant funding in September, and then by like November, December, you're going, well, that loan funding would have really assisted. Maybe I could take that for the rest of the academic year. You can completely do that. That's your choice. You would just go back onto your account, remove the request for no loan option, and then that would queue up that funding to be released. Just the absolute latest you could do that is kind of the end of February if you're starting till April, because you can't more or less change your mind 40 days prior to the end of your study period. So yes, you can change your mind. Just make sure you do it prior to the end of your studies and leave enough time for it to be processed. When do you repay your OSAP loan? 6 months after you graduate, or you leave for more than 6 months, or no longer being a full-time student. While you're attending post-secondary, so college or university full-time, you don't need to make any loan payments. After you leave school, you have a 6-month non-repayment period. During this period, you're not required to make any payments. However, if you want to, you can make payments whenever you like. You can pay it back right away in September if you're in that position, or if you've been done school for 2 months, let's say you graduated, and 2 months after you want to pay the whole thing back, absolutely you can do that as well. It's just not mandatory until 6 months of no longer being a full-time student. But if I have trouble or need help making student loan payment? So if you're having trouble when you're in the repayment stage, let's say it's because you can't find employment or other difficulties that make you suffer from financial hardship, they do have measures in place, revision of terms, making interest-only payments, or something called a repayment assistance plan as well. These measures are put in place to either help you defer or reduce that required monthly payment when you're put in that position. What am I responsible for? So the main thing with OSAP is you're responsible for repaying your loan and any associated interest according to the terms of your loan agreement. You'll want to notify, that stands for National Student Loan Service Center. They're the entity that releases OSAP funding, along with the entity that when you're in repayment, you pay it back to National Student Loan Service Center, not the school you attended. You want to let them know of any of your information changes, like your address, name, or phone number. You would want to notify us in your OSAP or financial aid office if you change your course load, if you drop down to part-time, if you're thinking about or have already switched programs. And you also want to come see us if you do withdraw from studies, so we can let you know the implications that means for you and your OSAP. If you haven't received all your OSAP funding, what should you do? Definitely touch base with us. We can make sure to say, yes, everything's been done. You completed all your supporting documentation. We confirmed your money to be released on such and such a day. If you haven't received it, usually takes like that 3 to 5 business days to be paying tuition and received in a registered bank account. It's always best to then contact National Student Loan Service Center. They've kind of been forward thinking in the sense that the online account, you can log on to your NSLSC online account to see the status of your funding and see where it is in transit. But if all else fails, you can always give them a call as well, or have us on a conference call and we can help you out too in the financial aid office when speaking to a representative with them as well. How else can we help? So anything OSAP related, any kind of questions you have about your application, any changes or updates, if appeals are part of the category as well, you would definitely want to contact us. If you have any questions about budgeting or resources, we're here to assist as well. If you find yourself in a hardship, any kind of emergency financial assistance, definitely a great resource to come and see us either by phone or email in these categories, or even we can do a chat like this as well to see how we may help. Along the lines of out-of-province loans as well. So if you're coming from Alberta for whatever reason and you're getting funding from Alberta Student Aid, we'd be the ones to most likely be in the middle to fill out any kind of information required about your program or application needs to have that out-of-province loan funding be received. Where else can you look for money? So OSAP is usually the first step. Beyond that, we at St. Lawrence College do have a scholarships and bursaries program. If you go to our website at stlawrencecollege.ca, you can either click on the fees tab or use the search bar and search for just the word scholarship or bursary. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Hasn't quite launched yet. We previously had it kind of going on in April, which was kind of a difficult thing to have it launched that early. So I think they rejigged the program to have it throughout the summer so everyone has an equal opportunity, because a lot of people were still kind of making their decisions in May and June. Paying a tuition deposit to confirm their seat was technically yesterday as well. So they've kind of pushed it back to be available later into the summer. So please continue to check our website. Just like OSAP, you apply every year. You apply once and it puts your name in all the different hats for grant money is the exact same thing. Scholarships and bursaries, it's free money. So definitely apply, be as specific as you can in the application. So that way you can get picked and chosen for scholarships and bursaries offered from SLC. We also have an employment on campus program, so you can work as a student employee. Definitely keep an eye on our website for that as well. Usually for fall intake, they start getting posted kind of late July, early August for opportunities as well. And you can always work off campus as well. There's been kind of a myth always been put around saying, well, if I get OSAP, I can't necessarily work while receiving OSAP. Definitely not the case. It's encouraged, so that way you can cover all of your expenses, bills, etc., to work at least part-time while you're in your studies. It's not until, if you can swing it, you're working full-time while attending full-time studies, you might need to claim additional income on your OSAP, but I would just contact us in the financial aid office for clarification. So if you ever need to contact us, like I kind of said at the beginning, we work year-round. We are not like faculty teachers. We don't get the summers off. Summer's probably the most busy for us because we want to make sure everyone's good to go for September to receive their OSAP funding so they can focus on their studies when September starts. We have 3 campuses. We all have our own OSAP/financial aid offices. There's 5 advisors in total. We have 3, including myself on the Kingston campus, and then there's 1 respectively at Brockville and Cornwall. If you have any questions, email at any point in time. An advisor will be happy to assist. Along with, we have our own little page on the St. Lawrence College website too as well. So that link is right on that page as well. If I didn't give you enough information today and you want more and more about OSAP, best place to go is right to the source. So on ontario.ca/OSAP, you'll see there's a bunch of options to learn more, play with the estimator, how to apply, steps after you apply. If you want more questions answered about repaying loans in the future, you can definitely go right on the website as well. But it's going to be your end-all be-all for checking your OSAP status. You'll continually check that throughout the summer to make sure all your boxes are checked and that you're just playing the waiting game for your OSAP funding to be released at the end of August, early September for when you start your studies. That's everything I have for you today. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, and thank you.